Hey, it's Aaron, metal theologian. Alright, so we're going to do a little bit more of the Canon today. I'm going to play 45s too, so we're starting out with this guy. Because again, a lot of these records I'm going to show are on labels and, you know. If I get ads put on my videos, I don't care that much. It used to bother me a lot more than it does now, but I still prefer not to, you know, because it's a pain in your ass as the audience, you know. If I were going to make a bunch of money off it, that'd be one thing, but I'm totally not, you know. It's not worth it to fucking monetize my shit so I can, like, annoy everyone who watches the video and make, like, a nickel, you know. Anyway, so you're not fucking around here. We're doing the Moxie. So I just had to go back and look at my first Canon video to make sure there wasn't any overlap. I actually would have shown the Fugs twice, but I covered the Fugs last time. You know, it's fun talking about the Canon, though, because some of the responses I got in the other one... I mean, first of all, this is my Canon, right? Not, like, the Canon as far as, like... There's no Beatles in here, okay? I'll tell you that right now. But, you know, if I were going to write, like, the Canon, like a basic education, rock and roll music, I mean, I'd totally put the Beatles in there. Because I can sit on the Beatles all day long. I'm perfectly capable of that, you know? But the fact is, they're kind of hard to overrate, you know? Because, like... There wasn't really, like, before the Beatles, like, the album wasn't really a concept. It was like, an album was a collection of singles until the Beatles made, like, an album that, like, was coherent, you know? The individual band members having their own identities as opposed to being, like, a singer in a backup band, that was pretty much the Beatles, you know? Writing your own songs, that was pretty much the Beatles, you know? So it's, like, really... It's easy to sort of, like, especially the earlier shit, you know, it's kind of more throwaway, they want to hold your hand and shit. But the second half of the Beatles catalog, like starting with about Rubber Soul, I may be tired of it, but that doesn't mean anyone else. That doesn't mean it's not important, you know. Shit, I left my e-cigarette somewhere. I don't know where, and I'm not gonna be able to do this if I'm not hitting that thing. Fuck. Bear with it just a second. Well, here, I'll just let you enjoy the gas can for a minute while I go find this fucking thing. Alright, here we go. We're back at business. So anyway, though, some of the people I was talking about this with in the comments, you know, it's like my Canon as far as like the records that like influenced me. But a long time ago, before I moved into this house, so probably 10, 11 years ago, I made a video about like records that kind of changed my idea about what music could be. And this isn't really the same thing as that, because like one of the big ones in that one was Machine Gun by Peter Brooksman, which is right here. Yeah, you know, it's a classic record, you know. But when I think of the Canon, I think of stuff where if we're having a conversation about music and you don't know this album, I'm going to be a little bit surprised. You know what I mean? If you're not like if you're just someone I meet on the street, right? But if you're someone who's like into music, I'm going to be surprised if you haven't heard of this stuff, you know? But I'll go out on a limb. I'll call out Mazzy, okay? Mazzy and I, we have pretty different taste when it comes to like what really sort of gets our juices flowing. But I'd be surprised if I showed a single record today that Mazzy hadn't heard of. He may not like these records, but he's heard of them. You know what I mean? Because he likes the shit he likes. It's not the same shit that I like, but he has a relationship with that music. And in the course of getting there, he's heard shit along the way, you know? And that's kind of how I see these records. Like, these are records where... It's funny, because there are a few in here that I don't even, like, play very much anymore. I'll actually start with one of those. Alright, here we go, man. Queen. Sheer Heart Attack. Now, how much time have I spent talking about Queen on this channel? Probably not a whole lot. These records have made appearances. I've probably shown the first three. Yeah. But, first of all, when I was in my teens, I really liked Queen for a few years. I was like a big fan. I still feel like these records are important, though, and important enough that, like, if you don't know what Queen sounds like, there's kind of a piece of the history missing. You know what I mean? Like, if you've never actually sat and listened to a Queen album, and probably not this one, probably it's going to have been A Night at the Opera, which is fine. That's actually a great record. You know, I'm as sick as Bohemian Rhapsody as anyone else. But there are great songs on that record, man, like 39, or the Prophet song is awesome. You know, I could do without I'm in Love with My Car, but, you know, it's a really good record, though. I have the first three at this point in my life. I don't pull them out all that often, but this one, even though it has Killer Queen and Now I'm Here on it, it also has, like, Flick of the Wrist, Brighton Rock, Stone Cold Crazy, In the Lap of the Gods, which is probably my favorite song. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't, like, bring back that Leroy Brown, so Queen, man, sheer heart attack, you know? If you want to hear good Queen, it's funny. If you want to hear the shit that I would consider canonical Queen, go for the first one and this one and then the second one. If you want to hear, like, sort of the big ones, you know, the Night at the Opera or News of the World, obviously, like We Will Rock You and that shit on it, you know? Because that album coheres, too, you know? I mean, these are good albums that they made. I don't love them the way I did when I was a kid, but there's still records that I think are important, you know what I mean? Here's another one. This is digging a little bit deeper. But Pere Ubu, man, especially the early records, like the first three, and especially the Modern Dance, I like the Rocket from the Tombs stuff more these days, okay? I don't reach for this record very often because a lot of the stuff is on, a lot of the same songs are on the earlier Rocket from the Tombs recordings, and I just like that stuff better. But this is still a great record. It was one I listened to a lot. And it's one that I listen to so much that it's like when I think of Cleveland rock and roll, I mean, Pere Ubu is pretty much top of mind, you know what I mean? I may talk about the Electric Eels first, but that's just my inner contrarian. That's me being kind of a dick, you know? Because Pere Ubu is really where it's at. Yeah, great album, man. I pulled out like 15 this time, so we'll see how many I get through. I don't want to make the video overly long, but... Alright, here's another one. I have talked about this a lot, okay? But I don't want anyone to ever underrate how much I love Stevie Wonder. And this is probably my favorite of his albums. It has You Are the Sunshine of My Life, it has Superstition on it. It also has, what's it called? Big Brother. It's a great song. Fucking The End, man. I believe when I fall in love, it'll be forever. I mean, my God, dude. Fuck, it brings a tear to my eye. It's such a great song. You and I Can Conquer the World. Just one great song after another one. And how many records do you have that have the title in Braille on them, too? Look at that shit. That's some real authenticity, man. Stevie Wonder. I like Stevie's 60s stuff very much. And in fact, it was kind of my entry point. I kind of like that stuff more than, you know, because coming off of metal, right? When I started, like, branching out into more, like, less sort of firmly rock musical styles. Why isn't this going in the inner? There we go. You know, I was a little bit put off by, like, the heavy synth stuff in that, which was a big part of what he was into at that point, you know, on those important records. The important records, as it were, are my favorite ones these days, because he was really doing some innovative shit with the synths. This is Hazard. This is going on next. New Wave of British Heavy Metal. That's what this all is. This whole box is that's sitting in front of me, so. Fuck, come on, get on, lady. Fuck. All right, there we go. Yeah, Stevie Wonder. It's funny. A long time ago, I did a little sort of interview with Little Bill from his channel. Much bigger channel. Excellent channel that you should all check out, by the way. We were talking about music, and, like, Stevie Wonder was just, like... After a certain point, it kind of felt like we would talk about, like, any other artist, and I'd be like, but Stevie, you know? Because Stevie's just, like, the king, you know? Here's one for Vinyl Richie. This fucking record right here, man. Funhouse by the Stooges. Specifically this record. First one's great. Raw Power. I listened to Raw Power enough that I think I understand what Bowie was trying to do with that production job. Maybe it didn't quite work out the way it worked out in his coke-addled brain. But, I think I get it, you know what I mean? It's funny, too. To me, the Stooges catalog consists of those first three plus Metallic KO. That seems like the original, like, Stooges run before they fell apart, you know? And then I know there was other shit later, but I never really followed it. This record, though, man, I discovered this when I was getting into 70s punk. I was listening to a lot of shit like Richard Hell and Television and the X-Ray Specs and shit like that. And I heard this record from 1970, and I couldn't believe how fucking heavy it was and how fucking punk it was. And even with the saxophone on side 2, man, I mean... I suppose the Electric Eels did that a couple years later with Davies clarinet, but it was just not the same fucking thing, man, because these guys were freaking out in a way where they knew what they were doing, you know? Where the Eels were just kind of like anarchists, you know? Yeah, like each side of this record has this arc too, you know what I mean? Like, side 1 starts just down in the street and then builds up through TVI and then sort of drops off into dirt. And then side 2 starts again with 1970 and picks up. And then instead of like dropping off, it just like explodes at the end with LA Blues. Fucking amazing record. And by the way, check out this gatefold. It's funny because this record seems so modern. I actually had it on CD before I found the record. And you didn't have this gatefold in there. That's where you can see it's a product of the fucking 70s, isn't it? Anyway, absolutely fantastic record. And again, one where if you've never heard this record, I'll be a little bit surprised, you know? If you're seriously into music, you know? Well, fuck, man. Let's just go with the big one right here. Fucking Stones. Now, it's weird, you know, there's sort of this old cliche about like how you can divide like music people into Beatles fans and Stones fans, you know what I mean? And I'm definitely in the Stones camp. I'm also definitely not the biggest Stones fan of all time. In a way, it seems random to me that the Stones got so big, because I don't know that what they were doing in their early career was any more innovative than like what them or the Shadows of Night or the Leaves were doing. They're better than the Knickerbockers, but I'm just trying to think of other ones. The Count 5 is maybe digging a little bit too deep, but you know what I'm saying? There were a lot of those sorts of like soul influence, like beat bands in the first half of the 60s. They weren't really good until they started doing the harder drugs. Starting out with their Satanic Majesty's Request to actually like through Beggar's Banquet, but this is the one that really hooked me. This is the one why I pulled it in, you know? This is definitely a record that everyone needs to listen to all the way through at least once. I'm like trying to go easy because my very good friend Eric Bauer said to me not too long ago that he wasn't sure he'd ever listen to a Stones record all the way through. We can still be friends, you can still be a music fan, it's all good, but if you haven't listened to this record all the way through, I'm going to be a little bit surprised, you know? To this day, I actually kind of like Country Honk more than the original version of Honky Tonk Women. But I first heard this record. This is my first copy of this that I got. The first copy of that I bought when I was like maybe 13 or something like that. I remember I taped it onto a tape and was like riding around on my bike listening to it on my Walkman and shit. There we go. All right, let's go with another one. It's funny, my wife would actually kick my ass if I didn't put this one in because I was so obsessed with this one. I actually haven't played it in kind of a long time, but still, this is a cornerstone for me, this fucking record. This is like a barometer record for me in certain ways when it comes to certain types of music in different ways. Fucking Suicide. The first Suicide record from '77. Their second record, produced by Rick Ocasek, was okay, but was a lot more modern sounding. I didn't have a whole lot of use for A Way of Life from like the late 80s. There's some demos out there from earlier than this. That's good stuff too. But this is the artifact for me, man. This is the record where when I heard it, I couldn't fucking believe it. You know, it was two guys, you know, Alan Vega on vocals and Martin Rev on instrument, singular. I love that. My first exposure to this band might have actually been a bootleg I had, a 45, with the Sisters of Mercy doing a cover of Ghost Rider, which didn't make any fucking sense to me at all. I was like, what the fuck is this? What are they doing? You know? Then eventually I got this. I was like, oh, fuck, man. That's the shit, you know? Big Suicide fan. I have some other, like, live ones and shit, like that Half Alive one, and, you know, like, it's the demos, and good stuff. But this one right here, just essential fucking record, man. Total classic. Let's go to another one, man. I will be surprised if you've never listened to a War album. I pulled this one because it's probably my favorite, but it's kind of close between this one and The World is a Ghetto. The first couple with Eric Burdon, I think I kind of throw away. A little bit sort of condescending to the black man's burden doesn't sit very well, honestly, you know. Not to be like super like, you know, not to get all lived up about this shit here or anything, but yeah, Slipping into Darkness, Baby Brother, All Day Music. It's a great record, man. And when it comes to these kinds of records, like these sorts of like funky R&B records from the 70s, these are still relatively easy to find. This one's great. Deliver the Word is great. Why Can't We Be Friends is great. There's a run of about 5 albums in there that are all fantastic, you know. And if you get one of the bad ones, they're not terrible. The first record they made, the self-titled one without Eric Burdon, with like the big, like all the hands on the cover doing this. I don't think that's a great record. But it's totally fucking fine too, you know? I'm not gonna shit on it. Anyway, War, man. Great record, very important band, and one that I feel like is sort of like a friend that sort of stuck with me through the course of my life. I got into War relatively early, and it's one of those bands that I would sort of forget about for a while, then come back to in a big way, and then forget about again for a while, and then come back to again in a big way. Yeah, and so now it's just like, it's just like a totem for me, man. It's just one of those bands that sort of like defines like the sorts of things that I look for in music, you know? What are we going to listen to here? Let me find another one. Well, let's play the Hollow Ground single. Why not? I tend to figure everyone knows Hollow Ground, so they don't need my hype, but you know. That's kind of the point of this video in a way, that I'll sit here and take a band like Hollow Ground for granted, you know, and I don't know if it come off that same way to most people. All right, man, here's another big one. And I'll be honest, I got into this one because of Metallica, okay? But this fucking record tripped me out, man, when I first heard it. I was like, it's almost like new wave shit, but it's like really dark. And there's this weird shit on here, like SO36. Fucking, yeah, which is like this weird instrumental. Also has The Weight, has War Dance. Not the same version of War Dance as on the single, which is worth getting anyway because it has Psyche on side too. But a great record, and one that really sort of, you know, I suppose this is one of the ones that sort of defined for me what I was going to look for in quote-unquote alternative music. And it's not that Suicide didn't do that too, but I discovered Killing Joke several years before I discovered Suicide. So, yeah, I fucking love Killing Joke, man. I think their first 4 albums were all great. And I can handle Nighttime. Then they got kind of crappy. Then they put out that really good comeback with Extremities, Somethings, and Hits. That was the tour I saw them on, actually. And Jazz Coleman on stage was one of the more intimidating looking lead singers I've ever seen. Like, he had this weird face paint on, and he just seemed really intense, you know? Awesome show. I want to say it was at Peabody's Down Under in Cleveland, but I'm not sure. It was definitely in Cleveland. Let's lighten it up, man. I will be surprised if you have never listened to Leon Redbone. Fucking easygoing guy, doing a lot of old standards, doing them in a way that's really easy to write off as corny, but just comes off as not only sincere, but like fresh, even though the songs he's doing are so old. I mean, Lulu's Back in Town is on this one. Fucking Polly Wally Doodle is on this one. Ain't Misbehavin' is on this one, you know? And it's just like him. Sometimes with some backup musicians, sometimes not. Really good records though, man. He made like 4 or 5 that I think are just fantastic. I don't even have them all at this point, but I let him go years ago, and then I was like, man, what were they doing letting go of those fucking Leon Redbone records? And I went on a little kick. I think I talked about him too. This was just like a year ago or something too, so... It's like Leon Redbone is one of those acts where, like, even if I never listened to any of his stuff again, it would still, like, be in my heart, you know? I suppose that's what I'm sort of getting at with this whole Canon thing. You can tell I'm still, like, thinking through what I even mean by the Canon, right? Here, let's just throw this one out there because it's fucking obvious. Of course, Black Sabbath. I mean, do I need to talk about this one? Spent a lot of time listening to Sabbath. And Master of Reality is probably my favorite. But if you haven't heard this one, you're missing something. There's a little piece of your like musical education missing. Because it's just great. And one thing I think is a little bit underrated about this record, not that I'm the only one who talks about this, but I think Bill Ward carries most of this album, especially side 1, man. Like, the fucking drums on all these songs are just so fucking good. The way they drive this shit forward in a song like The Wizard. I mean, you can argue it on Black Sabbath, too. You take the drums out of the song Black Sabbath, there's nothing left. You know, you just have that tritone and that's it, and Ozzy, you know. The drums are what builds all the intensity in that song, you know. And then sort of the shuffle during Behind the Wall of Sleep. Yeah, fucking great record, man. But probably not wanting to belabor too much. If you're watching this channel, I'm pretty confident you know the first Black Sabbath record. I'm pretty confident you know more than the first Black Sabbath record. You probably have opinions on Ozzy versus Dio versus fucking Tony Martin and so on, you know? But we've got to acknowledge it. Because Judas Priest isn't really in my canon in the same way. Because I got into Priest later. I didn't get really into Priest until I was like in my 30s. Simply the Scorpions, you know? So now it'll sort of surprise me a little bit if you've never listened to a Priest record. Not in the same sort of metaphysical way as one that I've like had with me all my life, you know? I don't know, maybe I'll change my mind about this and do a part 3 and it'll be all about Priest, you know? But there we go. Dude, here's another one. Tom Waits. Now, I got into Tom Waits via, the first one I heard was Blue Valentine. And I couldn't believe that, like, this guy was doing these sappy, like, you know, songs that were just so sort of low, understated and low-key and, like, mellow. I don't like ballads, but, like, with that kind of a rough voice delivery. The ones that I really cherish, like the holy trinity of Tom Waits to me, is Swordfish Trombones, Rain Dogs, and this one, Bone Machine, which was the hardest one to get, which is why I pulled it. Until there's been a reissue sometime in the last couple of years, but I had to put some effort in to get my hands on this bad boy. The other two aren't too hard to find. And hopefully you can find a reissue of this pretty easily now, too. Anyway, Tom Waits, man. What a turn, too, right? He, like, did this 70s stuff, right? First couple albums were almost, like, jazzy. Like Closing Time was almost like it's almost too mellow for me. And The Heart of Saturday Night is almost like jazzy. Then he has this sort of like ballady ones with Small Change and Foreign Affairs and Blue Valentine. And or actually before those, Nighthawks at the Diner, which was a live album, which I never really loved, but I do owe a debt of gratitude to, because that record, Nighthawks at the Diner, got me through a really bad hangover once upon a time. Back when I was about 20, I was fucking suffering, and by the time that record ended, I was like, man, I think it's gonna be okay, you know? Anyway, though, after that, though, like after Heart Attack and Vine, like where he went off into with this weirdness and shit, I mean, I'm all in, right? But, yeah. Tom Waits, man. So we can't really miss. And then we're gonna close out with a band that's very special to me, because that's funny, I've got like 3 or 4 more here that I can like prime the pump for part 3, alright? But this is a band that you fucking gotta know, okay? This band is... Okay, I talked about the Fugs last time. But the Fugs kind of led me to the GODZ. And I love the GODZ so much. I pulled both the albums that I have. There's one called The Third Testament, which is a lot less good. But these were also on ESP. There's the label there. Yeah. And I'm actually going to roll the dice. We're going to listen to a little bit of the GODZ at the end here. Because it's funny, Lester Bangs like wrote up a thing, and how someone told him that the GODZ were sort of like the Fugs, only even more primitive. And he was like, what the fuck could possibly be more primitive than the Fugs? Well, the answer is the GODZ. Not to be confused with the Rock and Roll Machines from Ohio, who I have no beef with, man. Those records are fun. But they don't rise to the levels of grandeur that this fucking thing does. I'm actually going to skip over the first song. Well, somehow Neil drop it for a sec so you can get an idea. But it starts out pretty like ordinary, just like kind of like really badly played. There's some sort of like flaw in the pressing there. But you hear that strumming and shit? It's a fucking auto harp. But they call it a psaltery. Because, you know, they're poets from New York, which you can tell from looking at them. Out of tune this is, man. They're just winging it, and they're high as fuck. Yeah, this is Turn On, and this is from 1966. Now this is them like playing well. Okay, we're gonna bump this ahead now to White Cat Heat. I mean, dude. And when I was saying before that I thought Mazzy would probably know all these records, I'll bet Mazzy's listened to the GODZ too. I don't think he likes them. I love the GODZ. Mazzy, if you're watching, I love the GODZ enough for both of us. It's fucking great, dude. I'm gonna flip it over for a sec here. It's hard to skip over 11 and Na Na Na. Lay in the Sun is probably another like real song. We're gonna go to, God, it's just called fucking Squeak. And you get to hear Larry Kessler on the violin. The very last song, they do a Hank Williams cover, and it's actually listed as a "May You Be Alone" instead of "May You Never Be Alone Like Me." If you've never heard it with a plastic flute, you haven't really lived, man. So this record isn't quite as like fucked up as this one. This one's more like an actual rock and roll record. See, like it says auto harp on the back. They weren't bullshitting about the psaltery anymore. That's a pretty good indication of how much more serious this one is, right? Anyway, I think the GODZ is a good place to close this out. I think we're even going to call this the Canon Part 2 featuring the GODZ. Because the GODZ fucking rule, dude. I mean, I listened to the shit out of this when I was like in my early 20s. So, you know, it's kind of become a part of me. I don't necessarily play this stuff as much as I used to. But these records are never going anywhere. They're going to be in my collection when I'm dead. Maybe buried with me. And maybe that's where they belong, is fucking buried with me. But I fucking love the GODZ. And I love everything else in here, too, in one way or another, you know? Some more than others, but that's the way it goes. And I hope you got a couple laughs out of this video, because it was a fun one to make, man. Thanks for watching. And maybe we'll do a Canon Part 3 if y'all aren't sick of my shit yet. Take care. Come on.